Hello, I am Stephen. This is our first lesson in Introduction to Psychology. Where should we begin? Let's start with my understanding of the discipline of psychology. You might think that psychology is one of the oldest fields of study because humans have always been curious about their inner worlds. However, in reality, psychology is relatively young as a scientific discipline, with its birth date marked in 1879 when Wilhelm Wundt established the world's first psychology laboratory at the University of Leipzig, just a little over 100 years ago. So, what does psychology aim to achieve as a discipline? Almost all psychology textbooks will tell you at the beginning, the goal of psychology as a discipline is to better describe, explain, predict, and intervene in human behavior. What does that mean? In simple terms, it's about how you do things in your daily life, why you do them, what will happen in the future, and what methods can be used to change your behavior. This is what psychology is about. However, as someone who has worked in psychology for many years, I now look back at this statement and feel that it is somewhat idealistic. Can using scientific methods to describe, explain, predict, and intervene in human behavior truly make people's lives better? Let me give you an example. I have many friends who, after having children, started reading psychology books to become better parents. These books scientifically describe what kind of children may have issues, explain why certain parenting methods can lead to problems in children, predict which parents are more likely to raise problematic children, and finally, provide intervention advice. However, many of these friends, after reading such books, say they don't know how to talk to their children anymore, fearing that saying the wrong thing could harm their children. Some young couples who have learned this knowledge become even more afraid of becoming parents, thinking that parenting is too complex and challenging, and that only mastering advanced theories can make them good parents. For these people, who would actually recommend, put those psychology books aside for now. These studies haven't helped you. As a psychotherapist, I have always believed that being helpful to people is the only important task of psychology. Whether it's describing, explaining, predicting, or intervening, it must meet this standard. So, how can psychology truly help people? I'll start by sharing my personal answer to this question. The help that psychology provides to people can be described using 4 key words: understanding, connecting, accepting, and changing. More precise understanding. Let's start with the first word, understanding. Many people studying psychology often begin by using professional terminology to describe psychological phenomena in everyday life. However, if all you do is give things a new name, it's not really helpful. Helpful understanding involves looking at phenomena from different angles. For example, I have a friend whose family returned from abroad a couple of years ago, and they faced a challenge. Their child, who was in elementary school, was struggling to adapt to the local education system, especially in mathematics, despite putting in a lot of effort. The whole family was worried. The father described it as the child having a fear of math. The mother's perspective was that the local school had overly demanding requirements that exceeded the child's age level. What about the child? He said, "I'm fine with math, but I struggle with language because my Chinese is only sufficient for daily conversations, and I can't keep up with the specialized knowledge." You can see that the same phenomenon can have several different descriptions. But are these descriptions just different names? No, the core difference lies in how the family members positioned the same phenomenon from different angles. The father focused on the child's personality, the mother on the school's curriculum. And the child himself placed the issue on his language ability. However, these different positions did not help them. Regardless of the child's personality or the difficulty of the curriculum, it was challenging to make significant changes, and improving language skills couldn't happen overnight. They asked me for my opinion, so I had the child solve a few math problems and observe the problem-solving process. I told them, I know where the issue is. The child lacks something called self-efficacy. We'll learn the specific definition of this concept later. For now, you can roughly understand it as the feeling of being capable while doing something. So, from which perspective was this problem positioned? It wasn't the child's personality, the curriculum's difficulty, or the language ability. It was simply the absence of a certain experience. Now the problem didn't seem so challenging because experiences are relatively easy to create. I asked the parents to assign math problems 2 grades below the current level, reducing the number of problems by half. The child only needed 20 minutes each day to effortlessly complete the math homework, and almost every time, they got all the answers right. After a little over a month, we gradually increased the difficulty back to the child's current grade level, and the child's grades did not decline. You can see that by positioning the problem from different angles, you get different descriptions. Good descriptions often position the problem in a more functional aspect, leading to more effective solutions. Psychology textbooks say that the second goal of psychology is to explain, which essentially means creating connections between different events. When someone has a particular psychological trait, you identify which other factors influence it, thus creating connections. However, not every connection is helpful to people. For example, some individuals who engage in domestic violence might justify their behavior by saying, "I suffered psychological trauma in my childhood, which is why I lose control of my emotions now, I'm also a victim." Is this justification correct? On the surface, it may seem scientifically plausible because it establishes a connection between their behavior and their past experiences. But there is a problem with this justification. It leaves the victims of abuse feeling powerless, as they not only suffer violence but also blame themselves for not taking care of the abuser. Where is the problem? On one hand, this explanation overly emphasizes one aspect of reality. Events are often connected to a myriad of variables, and there are complex interactions among these variables. There are no simple black and white conclusions. For instance, in the case of domestic violence, I could also explain it as, "It's because he's a bully who backs down when confronted. How could he control his temper with his boss?" More importantly, we point out these connections not to find excuses but to help people gain the strength to solve problems. In my counseling sessions with families, I often meet parents seeking help for issues related to their parent-child relationships. They have acquired some knowledge of psychology and feel like they are the root cause of their children's problems. However, the more they self-reflect, the more they lose confidence in communicating with their children. At this point, I tell them that the issues in parent-child relationships are more about children entering adolescence, experiencing many physiological and psychological changes, and engaging in conflicts with their parents as a normal part of growing up. This establishes a new connection. Parent-child relationship issues are not solely related to parents' behavior but also due to the child's age and changes in their internal environment. This perspective helps parents reduce self-blame and allows them to interact with their children more calmly. So, psychological explanations are not about finding any reason but about establishing meaningful connections between events with the purpose of empowering the individuals involved to more effectively address their problems. Acceptance and change for a better life. Finally, let's talk about acceptance and change. I understand your perspective on the terms predict and intervene in psychology. You feel that these terms may deny a person's subjective agency. While psychology can indeed predict the likelihood of certain events, such as which career path a person might excel in, the happiness of a marriage, or a child's psychological well-being, these predictions can sometimes limit a person's development. For example, when parents or teachers make predictions about a person's future, it can influence the individual's confidence and impact their ability to achieve their potential. The idea that we can intervene early to prevent problems from occurring is well-intentioned, but it should be approached with caution. For instance, when focusing too much on individuals who are deemed at risk, even ordinary expressions of concern may be misunderstood or lead to problems. This type of deliberate intervention might create issues where there were none in the first place. Your preference for the terms acceptance and change is certainly valid. Acceptance involves coming to terms with things that we cannot control, such as our family history. It's about acknowledging what we've experienced, whether we like it or not. Simultaneously, we can consider what changes we can make to live better lives. The concept of prediction and intervention, at its core, aims to answer the question, what aspects should we accept, and in which areas can we make improvements? Ultimately, the goal is to find the balance between accepting what is and striving for change in other areas. In essence, the field of psychology is about facilitating change. Whether it's pinpointing issues more accurately, creating more effective connections, or recognizing what cannot be changed, it all revolves around facilitating positive changes that help us live better lives. This is how I view psychology, not just as lofty descriptions, explanations, predictions, and interventions, but as a scientific method that complements our individual experiences and intuitions, offering professional assistance to improve our lives. Throughout the course over the next year, I would like to guide you from this perspective as we re-examine the field of psychology. You will discover that psychology is a diverse and multifaceted discipline with numerous systems, methods, and viewpoints, and they may even contradict one another. However, as long as you remember the ultimate goal, to provide help, you'll see that different methods are just different paths to assist people.